All right, welcome to Homeschool Conversations. We are live. I am Rebecca Good, your host, and I have two wonderful guests with me today. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a moment. I do want to quickly talk about some upcoming talks that we're going to be having. Next week, we're going to be talking about outdoor education. And I'm going to have Becca Kieran of Valley Forest School. And then I'm also going to have Catherine with One Forest School talking about outdoor education. I know a lot of kids have been spending a lot of time online doing distance education. So we're going to talk about the benefits of spending time outdoors for kids. We're also going to be talking about homeschool in a two-income family and also homeschool single parents. There's actually a national association for single parents who homeschool. So I want to talk more about that. We are going to address vocational training in homeschool, and we'll talk also about online learning. There's more talk about in the fall of students doing more distance learning and online learning. So we'll talk about what does a strong online learning program look like? What are some of the drawbacks and how to balance that? For kids' education. So those are a couple of the upcoming topics that we have. But today we're going to continue our conversation about myths and misconceptions about homeschool. And then at the end, we're going to talk specifically about how to just different tips to help families who are currently new to this whole homeschool thing, and who are considering in the fall, who are looking at what their options are for next coming school year. So Misty, if you would introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Misty Pernot, and I have been homeschooling for 13 years now. I have 4 children, and my oldest is a junior. She actually has been going to high school, public school since the 9th grade. And then I have 2 girls, one in 6th grade, one in 4th grade, and a little boy who's in 2nd grade. And so I've been homeschooling all of them. And I also am an instructor at the Road Less Traveled Academy. And that's it.
All right. And Misty, you have been subbing in the public schools this year. Okay. So I do want you to talk a little bit about that, because you've been homeschooling for so long. And then I haven't been in the public schools. It's been about 4 years since I've actually been in the system. So you've kind of got a little more firsthand knowledge with that. So if you want to speak to that, that'd be awesome. Okay. And then Marsha Osburn.
Let me unmute. Hi, I'm Marsha Osburn. I am a member of a co-op admin team here in North Carolina at the Joy Co-op, and I have been homeschooling my children since my daughter was halfway through kindergarten. We made that decision, my husband and I together, based on my experience in the public schools from K-12 and working with some of the adult programs at community colleges and teaching French and ESL and being in and out of mainstream classrooms and just deciding we wanted something different.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I know Marsha and I, we actually went to graduate school together at UNC Charlotte. We both hold masters in education and teaching English to speakers of other languages. So again, we both have that background in the public schools, so we can again kind of speak to hopefully both sides of that. So all right, well, let's talk again. We talked about this a little bit last week, but this is a big one. It is about socialization. And for example, this morning I was reading some comments online about people talking about homeschool and, again, not being sure about what's happening in the fall, at least with the schools here in Virginia. I'm sure that's happening everywhere. That conversation, I know New York has talked specifically about moving to doing more online learning. And I saw a comment, someone said, kids need school because they need socialization and they need sports. and I read things like that, and I felt almost offended, because I feel like this morning my son and I, we had breakfast together. we have, we have deep conversations about, what does he think about life, and, the different things that he's interested in. And we can, have these, this extended time together. And I thought, why is this not socialization? Why does he have to be, with other 9-year-olds, talking about what 9-year-olds talk about? Again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. My kids certainly have friends. We go to co-ops, we're active in the community. But why is that not valid? I just felt like I felt a little offended. And then also with sports, and while I do see validity in, in team sports, and obviously the physical benefits of sports, and, getting out there and getting exercise, why I don't really understand that. Why is it that sports is socialization? Why are other avenues for that? So what do you guys think as far as socialization? How do you feel your kids have adapted as far as being socialized? What are some things does that concern you when you started homeschooling? Was socialization a concern, and is it now? So if either of you want to jump in on that topic.
I would say a lot of, I think the people who are commenting about not wondering about socialization have never attempted to find a homeschool group, because once you find one, you find 20, and you can find, and that's in the smallest of communities. So you can be as busy and involved as you want to be, or as removed and uninvolved as you want to be. I would also say that the parents who are expressing concern right now, I think they're expressing concern because it's a complete departure from the normal of what they experienced. So they grew up going to school and playing sports or cheering and going to prom and graduation and all of that, and having friends that they saw for 7 hours a day. Whether or not they were allowed to talk to them more than 10 minutes was completely irrelevant, but because they got to be in the same space. So I think that just the departure from the what everyone has been conditioned to is the biggest concern.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if anything, we should be asking, we should be taking a pause and being like, is it okay that, why are we all following the flock into public school? Like, why can't we say, hey, let's take another look at public school instead of like, let's look at homeschool and all the wrong things. And I don't understand why people think that keeping children in their peer group, age group for K through 12 prepares them for real life. Because when they walk out those doors, they're going to be with all kinds of different age groups and, different walks of life, and, not the same high school, not the same, they're not all going to be 17 years old. And I just don't understand why we think that like that's socialization, is keeping them in a classroom with people only their own age, and, going together as a group everywhere. And like, it's just not real life. I just don't think it prepares them for real life. But yeah, so.
Well, and unlike silent lunch, which is regularly implemented, or having to walk at recess, which is also regularly implemented as a disciplinary measure for students who talk too much, we're going to make them be quiet longer. One thing that we do at our co-op is we have an extended social time at the end of the classes. So the kids are interacting with everybody from pre-K up through high school. So they're all having time to learn from each other, and the older students are learning responsibility while not being made to be responsible for the younger students. They're able to help. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
No, and I was just thinking back on when I was in public school. This was, around like 2003, 2004. I was in a very small rural community in North Carolina, and we had silent breakfast every day. The kids, they could not say a word. They would just come in, get their breakfast, all sit down at the table and eat. And that wasn't even as a disciplinary measure. It was just like that all the time. And Marsha, you're so correct in that, silent lunch and walking at recess and sitting out in the hall, that the so the school is not necessarily all about socialization. A lot of it is about, okay, be quiet, sit here, you're too loud, to this, to that. I do think a lot of parents, they don't really know. They think it's socialization, but yet it's not authentic, like you said. When you're out in the workplace, you're with people of all different backgrounds and all different ages, and you're not just with that homogeneous group and your zip code of your age. So to somehow think that that's teaching a life skill or a necessary, job skill, I would definitely question that.
Now, I would like to qualify that though by saying that the types of disciplinary measures or consequences do vary from classroom to classroom and widely from school to school, and what's allowed varies from system to system and state to state. So that's not to say that that's happening everywhere, but it does still happen in local areas. So.
All right. Well, and again, I talked to Matthew Nielsen, who was here last week. He talked about school and the K-12 realm. That's really the only time in your life that you're really going to have that separation, with kids of your own age. So what are some different ways that I know both of you are involved in co-ops? Some people may actually not know what a co-op is. So if either one of you maybe could just take a minute to define that for people, or just talk about there's different meetup groups. I've talked about on Facebook, there's so many different meetup groups for field trips and things. But what are some ways that your kids are involved in the community, and also what is a co-op? So if either one of you would take that.
The co-op that we are currently in, I mean, there's different types of co-ops, but generally a co-op is, a cooperative learning place. So it's parents, offering some sort of, class or service that they, are good at or passionate about, or, are willing to teach. And that you're working together to, teach the children that are coming, and you're cooperating. That's what a co-op is. And it's, a variety of ages and grades, and, depending on what kind of co-op you're at, there's a schedule usually, and it's almost like a school day, that's what it is. And it usually meets once a week, sometimes once or twice. And for our children, it became, or it has become, a very special part of their week. They love going, and, they love their teachers, and not this current year, but in years past. And it's a super awesome part. It's just a good rhythm to have, because it kind of sets off the rest of your week. And for me personally, I kind of like that you just meet once a week, and then you don't have to do it every day. And it's a good balance for our family anyway.
I would agree with that 100%. Our classes at the co-op have ranged from robotics to Spanish, French, survival skills. We've most recently had a mom who they run a sheep farm. And so our co-op spent the day out on the farm helping to administer vaccines by drawing up the medicines, and we got to mark the sheep, so, and they learned how to build a basic shelter should they be outdoors. And unfortunately we didn't get to finish that class because of Corona, but I'm hoping we'll get to soon. But
yeah, that sounds great.
You can find one that's as active or as inactive as you want. We're once a week also.
Yeah, my kids right now, we've been in 2 co-ops. We have the Road Less Travel. That's kind of our academic co-op, and then they're in a forest school, which, like I said, we're going to have the director of that program. She'll be on next week. So I'm kind of an eclectic homeschooler. I like, I do, we have our structured days, but then we have like forest school is just kind of a day for, for them to, kind of get outdoors. It's very much play-based learning, very much a natural approach to learning. And then I do give my kids I try to take even like half a day and let them just work on their own interests. Like my son loves coin collecting. My daughter, she likes to make hair bows. She likes to do cooking. So I kind of give them some time to pursue, those interests. So like I said, we do a little bit of both, but some co-ops are tuition based. So you do pay, and the teachers will kind of take that off your plate where they'll teach, and they'll give the kids homework to do throughout the week. Other co-ops are volunteer, where all of the parents are participating and teaching. So it's really, like I said, it's kind of up to you. If you want to find something, if you're really on a budget, then I would say find a co-op where you can participate. But if you have a little bit more of a budget, and you can, for me, I do work part-time and I go to school, so our Monday co-op, because I can pay the tuition, and then I kind of get that time where they're, kind of in their classes for that one day, but then I still get the rest of the week, with them. And then I help them with their assignments. So I know exactly what's going on, with what they're learning. And then I can still participate, even though I do get that little bit of time to kind of catch up on, on what I need to do. So parents, you don't have to do everything. There's many opportunities for socialization. And like I said, I like the once a week, because I know for me, when I was in school, sometimes being with the same kids every day can get that get tiring, and then there's more opportunity for arguments and bullying, and those kinds of things. So sometimes the one day a week, it kind of gives them that outlet, but it's not always too much. That can happen sometimes. So, all right, well, anything else with socialization that you want to hit?
Well, I would like to point out too that everybody says, well, this must be easy for you because you already homeschooled. And I've had to be very clear, this is not what we usually look like. Usually we're going somewhere almost all the time. And so this is quarantine schooling. This is not homeschooling. So just to throw that in there.
No, and there was an article, I'm not sure where it was, but it was talking about how kids not being in a school building is causing trauma. And Carrie McDonald, she's the author of Unschooled. And she said, let me fix that headline. Let me say that quarantine is causing the trauma and not necessarily not being in the school building. I'm sorry, Misty, did I interrupt you? Did you want to?
I was just seconding what she said about this is not normal. Like, oh, this is easy for you because you've done this before. No, it's like, we have a lot of freedom, being at home. And so our kids are definitely ready for like a mental break. They just want to go and they want to run. And that's one of the beautiful things about homeschooling is that we have that freedom, and we've built that into, our homeschool day where they know, hey, we're going to go do A, B, and C today because we have time and we can do it. Or go visit, this other homeschool family, or we're going to go here. We're going to go to, the Homestead Creamery, get some ice cream. I really want to go do that. And
I love the Homestead.
Us too. And so anyway, lots of field trips are not happening. And when I say field trip, I mean, sometimes that includes, going to Chick-fil-A and Target. Like my kids, that's a fun day for my kids. So anyway, but yeah, this is not normal for anybody for sure.
And again, I would say that what's traumatizing the kids is the sudden departure from what they were accustomed to. It's not necessarily what they've been thrown into. It was the act of being ripped away from what they were accustomed to. Because that's been tough for the adults as well, And that's one of the huge benefits of our co-op to me too, is as a mom, I'm home with my kids all day now. I don't teach actively anymore outside of the home. So the idea of having other moms who are familiar with the ins and outs of a homeschool day has been a true lifesaver. I mean, it's such a release to get to see my mom friends every week. Just as much as the kids love the co-op, I love the co-op.
I agree. On Monday mornings, me and Mike, we kind of all, it's like 9 a.m. and we arrive and we all go in our separate I go to hang out with my mom friends, and they go with their friends. And yeah, and I would definitely agree with that this has been very different for us. Like our forest school program, that has not been, I don't know a good way to put forest school online. So that's been totally canceled. And then some of their road less traveled, their co-op classes, some have been moved online, but not all of them. I know art, for example, that they weren't able, and my daughter's sewing class, they weren't able to move that online. So we've had to kind of switch to, doing some of that distance learning. So yeah, it's been definitely very different for my kids. But I will say the one thing that I was already accustomed to was creating the structure and the discipline. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I was prepared to do that. I was prepared to take on that role of, whatever, if they're not getting the instruction that they were getting, I can take that on. And I kind of already knew, like I said, because I've had to teach my kids some of those subjects before, some of the difficulties, and I was ready, to face that. And I think a lot of times, I think a lot of parents, they kind of, just kind of leave that for the school, and they're not as involved. And so I think this has been a bit of a wake up of, oh, wow, maybe I didn't even know my kid was behind, or I didn't even really know what they were doing. And so they're kind of being thrust into this. But I hope that there'll be some benefits of that. I hope that more parents will get involved, because a lot of the research that I've done, especially when I was teaching ESL, I was really looking at the academic achievement of my English language learners. And this was a very small study, but I did a lot of research about parent involvement. And that was the number one factor in students' academic achievement, was having that parent involvement. And so I really hope that this will, and so I think some parents don't think about that. They just think that the school is going to handle everything. And I would just say to parents that just that involvement, just kind of knowing what's going on, being willing to sit down, with your kids, letting them talk about what they're learning, is so rich, and it's valuable for the family bonds, but also that there's a correlation with their academic achievement. And so I hope that this will help to get the parents back, into that space.
I think it would help.
Echoed in national and larger studies also.
Yeah, like I said, I found a lot of that in the bigger studies, but it was definitely in the small, my little small study.
And I think it would help public school teachers, for parents to be involved, because it makes the kids care. Like, then right now I feel like as a substitute, I know I'm not getting a clear picture. Kids are not the classroom does not look the same with a substitute, and I get it. But there is such a disconnect where I think kids think they're just working for nothing. What does it matter? And that's sad. And so I think parents being involved would just help so much for kids to think that this is worthy, that schoolwork is worthy. And you need to learn that anyway, because work is worthy, and we're created to work. I mean, that's what we want to do that. So I think, instilling in them that this is important and what you're doing is important, and we want to know what you're doing. And I think that would just go a long way for students and teachers at public schools.
All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit, but this is going to kind of go with Misty, with a little bit of what you were saying of kids, because I think that does happen a lot of times. Kids don't see the value in what they're doing. And I would say, and again, this is not in all schools or all teachers, but I would say there's a lot of what we call busy work, because the kids have to be there for 7 hours a day. So sometimes the teachers are, kind of just finding things for kids to do. And I think the kids, they can sense that if this is just kind of busy work. And then there's that, that little bit of rebellion of, why do I have to do this? Am I wasting my time? So let's talk about instructional time. And I've got here quantity and quality. And like I said, I know when I started, I was coming from that background of it has to be, there's something magic about Labor Day to Memorial Day, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 3:30. Like those are the magic hours. And kids can't learn outside of that time frame. And I really had to break myself of that thinking that it had to be, again, the 7 hours from Labor Day to Memorial Day. And I have just found that I don't need 7 hours a day. Again, when things are happening one-on-one, you can customize. That's the great thing about homeschool is you can customize the child's education, and it's really not that expensive to do that, which we can talk about that another time. But so for my kids, we do have a routine. Like we have some activities that we do every day. And then we have other, special days, again, in the field trips and things like that, that we do. But, sometimes they do school at night. Sometimes we do it on the weekends. I still have them doing things in the summer. So we don't take necessarily a full, the full 9 weeks or whatever it is for the summer. We don't. But that's just what works for our family. So what would you guys say as far as instructional time, maybe help parents,
Um,
that pressure of if my kid is not sitting in front at a desk for 7 hours a day, it's going to be okay.
I liked when you said that you had to break yourself of the public school mentality because I had to do the same. And when we first started homeschooling 3.5 years ago, I had envisioned, you have these grand visions of what your day will look like, and everyone will wake up at this time, just like you always do, because you're in that routine. And then you're going to have X amount of time for this subject and X amount of time for this subject and whatever. And what I've found is that the more that I've let go and let it be more organic, the better it has gone. And that was really hard for me to let go. Not so much for the kids, but for me. And the idea of, if you look in other countries, they're talking about doing away with school subjects and doing more of just an integrated approach of learning as a general process. And it's like, in the public schools, they're trying to integrate science and social studies in with literature and English language arts and math, and having these all-encompassing units, which is more like what I think it was Finland that's looking at doing away with school subjects recently. So the idea that school has to look the way that it did when we were in school, or even when we were teaching in school, is completely bogus. I don't know of a day when we've spent 7 full hours on official curriculum work. Now, there's a lot of learning happening. My daughter loves to play Roblox, and her spelling and reading have greatly improved from using the chat function there. And my son as well, with Minecraft. And, is it what I envisioned them learning through? No, but it's happening, and I'm okay with it. And they're spending more time on it now than I would like, but we'll work on that again.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that being on kind of this side 13 years later, I wish I could have told myself in the beginning, like, hey, just relax. You don't have to wake up and get everybody sitting at a desk at 8 a.m. and Pledge of Allegiance. Like, it doesn't have to look anything like that. But, somehow we are conditioned to think if we're not doing it like that, somehow they're missing out. And it's just a roadblock, and you just need to get over it, because really, my oldest will graduate next year, and granted, she is in public school right now, but I was the one that taught her the majority of her years, and she's going to graduate. She's fine. And my kids who I homeschooled, the other ones, up until this last year, this was their first year for my other 3 to go to public school. And if you would have told me like 5 years ago that was going to happen, or maybe 10 years ago, I would have panicked, because I would have thought, oh gosh, I haven't done enough. they're not going to know what they're doing. They're going to get in there. And the complete opposite has been true. Like they're in there, and I'm this is not bragging at all, but they just they're fine. And they're a little bit like they're kind of dusting everybody, because they're just like they're wanting to get their work done and get out, and so they're I don't know, so they're doing fine. And you will be fine. Don't be scared. You've taught your kids how to use the potty and how to eat, how to use a fork and a spoon. Like, you can do it. You really can. You really can.
Yeah, and I would even say, and with the structure and the discipline, I know for my kids, I feel like they, and a lot of kids, I think right now are struggling because they don't have the self-direction. Like they're not like motivated. They're kind of conditioned to sort of wait around for, okay, you tell me what to do. You tell me where to sit, when, to get up. And like with my kids, we go over, the assignments, and they have quite a bit of independent work. And I wouldn't say that they're necessarily smarter or better. It's just they have to do that. They know that I'm not going to sit there. I'm not holding their hand. Just because they're homeschooled, I'm not holding their hand. That like, you have to be able to do that, because graduate school, one of the things I'm actually studying is about self-regulation, self-direction, because a lot of the higher ed has moved to online learning. And that's one of the struggles that a lot of students have had, is that they don't, because with online learning comes a lot of that self-direction, self-regulation, working backwards. And so like I said, I know for my kids, I've really tried to instill that in them, that they have to be self-motivated, know when to ask questions, not be afraid, to ask questions. But that, like I said, I don't sit there, I really don't spend like I said, I don't spend 7 hours a day just sitting there, teaching them new concepts. I might introduce a few things, and then they do some practice. And then, but they do get the immediate feedback. That's another, big piece of, as far as the instructional time, because they don't have that lag in, figuring out what did I get wrong. And also with assessment, my kids, like I said, when they do an assignment, I pretty much try to look at it, and we go over it in pretty short order. And I think in a lot of public schools, there's so much time that goes by between the time that they take an assessment and then when they get feedback, if they get feedback at all. And that's some of the issue with the standardization of the testing, is that you don't necessarily get feedback for correction, and it's not individual. It might be, just all together. But I do want to speak as far as instructional time and results of that. Homeschooler, I know that this is another myth, is that homeschool is not regulated and that we don't have any accountability. I know there are some states where I think they don't have to necessarily even apply or give assessments, but here in Virginia, we do assessments, or they have to have some type of evaluation. And I know for my kids, even when I get worried, are they getting enough math? Are they getting up to enough this? They always end up doing just fine, on the assessment. So, and so that is to speak to the regulation that we do indeed. And we have the outcomes, that's the thing. The research is showing that homeschoolers have strong academic outcomes. So that instructional time, is it necessarily correlated to strong academic outcomes? I would question that.
And I would say too that we do one big annual assessment, as is required by the state of North Carolina. But aside from that, I don't use very many formal assessments. I use assessments to direct instruction, but not to evaluate. Now that will have to change once we get up into the middle school and high school years. There will have to be formal grading, but for now, we're just working on, we work immediately. And like you said, there's the immediate feedback. You get the immediate return on whether they've gotten it or not. And the benefit of homeschooling, unless you have 12 to 15 children, your workload is going to be less than that of your average American teacher. And I know 12 to 15 would be a dream classroom for most mainstream teachers. They're pushing 30 and on average students in each class. So the idea that I can look at just my 2 children and tailor the instruction to exactly what they need, that is one of the huge benefits of homeschooling, just enormous benefits. And they're not subjected to assessments, which are necessary in the way that some of them are necessary in public schools to help direct the instruction, because the teacher needs something that she can point back to and say, this is definitively why your child needs XYZ. So I do understand the need for it there, but that is one of the reasons that we chose homeschool as our avenue. I didn't feel that I felt like my children could be instructed without being assessed every third week or 3 days or however.
Yeah, like I said, we do just that, that one formal assessment at the end of the year, but I do informal assessments, every day. But and I know for us as a family, we're looking more at mastery. We're not necessarily looking at, trying to hit a certain, percentage, by a certain day, and like that, Labor Day to Memorial Day, mindset, we can, I realize we can stretch things. If we want to move ahead, we can move ahead. If we need to go back, we can go back. If we need to take a break, I know with my daughter, I can't remember what it was. It was something with math she was really struggling with. And so I was like, you know what, let's just take a break. So I think we took like 2 weeks and didn't touch it. And then as soon as we picked it, and then as soon as I was like, okay, we need to get back to this, and it was, oh, it was just like the light bulb went off. But so we didn't have that, that struggle where I was trying to push her into something maybe that she wasn't ready for, maybe cognitively, she just wasn't quite ready to hit that. But then, like I said, once we picked it back up, then she was able to run with it. So yeah, so instructional time, again, it just depends on the child, and like I said, that's the benefit of homeschool, and that's the benefit of parental involvement, is that you know your kids, and so you know what can work for your kids. You don't always have to be the one to do it, to implement it. And like I said, we'll talk more at another time about personality differences, because I've heard a lot of parents talking about, well, I can't teach my kid, or we end up arguing, and those kind of things. So we may, talk some about that. But like I said, with the instructional time, it just depends really on the child, of what they need, and how it can be implemented a little differently in homeschool. So, all right, well, let me move on to this next one. So this is a fun one, a homeschool myth. Homeschoolers don't have proms or graduation. Well, my first question is, why is this necessarily other countries? We had 2 exchange students last year, one from Germany, one from Italy. And that was their big, thing, was they wanted it to be like High School Musical, because they don't have like they never, they don't do proms. They don't do like, the big graduation ceremony. And so they just thought that would be, that was like their American dream. So I do want to say there are people in this world currently who don't have these events, and they're able to survive without them. But as far as proms and graduations, homeschool, I mean, like we've been talking about, the homeschool community has grown so much that there's pretty much anything that you want. I mean, I've been getting more information. My daughter's getting, a little older now, so I'm seeing all about these homeschool dances and events and things like that. We do have a graduation at our co-op, and I think they allow even homeschoolers who aren't in our co-op to participate in that. So, within your homeschool communities, do you have proms and graduation, and what do you think why is that such a strong societal value for people?
I don't know. I was talking to my husband this morning, because I'm like, why do we put so much emphasis on prom when it's an expensive, ritual? It's like a ritual. Like, I don't even know why we're doing it. I feel like it was just some decision made decades ago, and we just haven't figured out that it's dumb. So anyway, but he was like, well, there's some positives, and I guess there are, but I feel like prom, especially, maybe not so much graduation, because graduation is a celebratory time, you're recognizing your graduates' hard work and getting through, this part of their life. But prom, and I went to 3 proms. So and I had fun, but they were not defining moments in my life. And I don't remember a lot of them. I mean, I know I had fun in general, but like, I don't know. I just feel like, um, as homeschoolers, you can find ways to do things like prom in a much more affordable and I even want to say, I want to be careful here because I don't want to get political, but prom in American high schools are very, it favors one kind of kid, to be honest, in my opinion, and that's kids who have money. And it's a privilege. It really is. Prom is a privileged thing, and I know a lot of families who struggle to get their kids prom dress and all the stuff that goes along with it. And so as homeschoolers, I feel like you're able to, attend something like that in a much more feasible, family friendly, budget wise, in all kinds of different ways. You just have a better control over, celebrating things like this, these milestones in your student's life. And it's just, I don't know. I feel like if anything, it's more, because then your student, I'm all kind of all over the map. Your kid also sees what gets put into this kind of thing, into putting together a prom or graduation. Like it's not just, something that happens magically. And so, I don't know. I just think as a homeschooler, you can definitely do prom. There's proms everywhere. We have a prom at our co-op now. I don't know if you're aware of that, Rebecca, but there's a prom going. I don't know if they're going to do it now, but they sold tickets and they did the whole thing, and so you can do it, but I think it's just a much more ramped down version, which is what it should be. It should be way more ramped down, and you can still have fun and not spend $1 million and exclude, people who can't do it, or it's a very. I think it's just more friendly to do it through a homeschool avenue. I'm going to stop talking now.
I would agree with that. And just like Misty said, if you can find a co-op, you can find one that's doing a prom and you can find one that's doing a graduation. So even if yours is not, I promise you there are some in your area who are. So.
All right. So we got that myth debunked. All right, moving on. Structure and discipline. Like I said, I've seen a lot of people online talking about we need to get kids back into the school buildings because they need structure and discipline. and I would say to that, structure and discipline can certainly happen in the home. and I've even seen there was one article, and it was a mom, and she, and again, she was talking about how she's struggling right now, that this is really difficult with working at home and managing all the kids. And I totally understand that. I would just hug her and say, well, I guess maybe not now with my gloves on and my mask on, but I would just tell her, hey, don't pressure yourself so much. But there was a line in this article, and it talked about, well, my home is a loving place, but it's not a place for learning. And I would just say to that I think that your kids are learning at home, whether you think they are or not. They're learning. And I know schools, build themselves as places to teach citizenship and to teach societal values. But that starts in the home. So kids are learning in the home, whether it's, paper and pencil kind of learning, they are learning in the home. So I think we need to be aware of that. But I thought that, to me, that's interesting that, again, because I've been homeschooling, for so long now, that's very natural for us to, I understand that learning is happening in the home, and we do have, some structure. And I've talked about this before, at least for us in homeschool. And parents, anything that I'm saying, please don't feel like you have to do it the way that I'm saying, because I don't ever want because homeschool is all about your family, what works for your family, and finding what works for your family. So I don't mind sharing what I do, but I'm in no way judging or saying that you have to do it this way. But the way that I started was I have a whiteboard, and we have We have our scripture for the day. We do have vocabulary for the day. And then I write out our assignments for the day. And as far as structure and discipline, again, if you have a child that is more self-directed and more self-motivated, my daughter's pretty good at that. I know because she likes to kind of make her own schedule. So she sees, what it is that the expectations for the day, but she kind of can work at her own pace. My son, we need a little more, okay, from 10 to 10:30, you're doing this. 10:30, and as he's getting better, I've told him, as you're showing improvement that you can kind of follow some schedule, I might give you a little bit more leeway and give you some more choices in what you do. And when. And my kids are definitely, they're negotiators. And I don't know if that's a homeschool thing. Maybe it's just my kids. But I do feel like homeschoolers because they kind of can get a little bit more of that attention. They know. And in the beginning, I thought, well, that's great. I want my kids, to be negotiators, and I want them, to question things and not always take things at face value. But then sometimes when they do that to me, they'll negotiate of, well, could I do this after this, or could I do this other assignment instead of this one? And so again, I'm learning that not only is it good for them to negotiate, but I also have to at times, create the boundary of, no, it needs to be this way. So as far as structure and discipline, that depends on you as the parent. But yeah, we don't always have to rely on the schools for structure and discipline. So how do you all handle structure and discipline in your home? Are you kind of more unschoolers? Are you a little bit more, I know a lot of my friends do like classical, kind of, that's a little bit more strict and a little rigid. And I may do a whole episode about different methods that people use, because it's really all over the place. So how do you kind of handle structure and discipline in your home?
I think what you said in the beginning there is, you kind of have a whiteboard and you set up expectations. So we don't do a whiteboard necessarily, but my kids, they kind of know this is how our day is going, and it's real loose, but they know, hey, I have to get this spelling done. And they all three might be doing different math curriculums, because they all have different ability. And some maths are harder than others. And so they all know, hey, we have to get this math done, this assignment done by, 1 o'clock if we want to go here or there, So I think just stating expectations is the number one thing you can do. And for parents who are struggling now, that's really, I think part of the problem is you've never had to think through, because you just send them to school and the school does that. And I get it. But all you have to do is just think, okay, give yourself grace, number one, and then say what are reasonable expectations I can have, and then go from there, kind of work backwards, and then set them up for success. And then, and you'll know which kids need what, like, hey, I'm going to have to sit down with this one, today, and kind of make sure they're reading okay and they're comprehending. And, but just like Rebecca, I do not sit down, even with my little guys. Like, I don't sit down with them. They know this is what I have to do. And other times I will sit down, but expectations is the key, is having realistic expectations and making sure they're on the same page as you. And they are lawyers. They are little lawyers. All kids are lawyers, and you just have to get ahead of that. But they they feel so much more connected to their education when they can be like, hey, even my 6th grader now, she's going to come home next year for 7th grade. And she's just like, hey, can we not do this math for 7th grade? Can we do this other math? And, but that's what we're going to do, because she's just like, she knows what she wants. And so, yeah.
I would piggyback on everything that y'all said. Like I alluded to before, my homeschool is a lot less structured than I ever envisioned that it would be. But you do what your life and your situation dictates necessary. I myself am a cancer survivor, and the treatments have left me with continued fatigue. So the day does not go like I ever thought it would. And we do our work, but I usually do it with them. Again, I think it's from what we've been through. As many times as I can hold my kids, I'm going to hold my kids. So we often sit on the couch, and they're in my lap, and we're doing school, and they're in 4th and 2nd grade. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Marsha. That's amazing. So proud of you. I would also, just one quick thing with structure and discipline. I know I've seen a lot of parents talking about they're struggling because they have their house is a mess, and they're trying to do school, and they're trying to cook and do all these things. My kids, they participate in the domestic work. My kids, they clean bathrooms. They help get dinner ready. I'm not afraid to have them do dishes. That is part of, we usually take one day a week and we do all the big cleaning. But they do laundry, they clean their own rooms, they clean other parts of the house. So I would even say, with kids being home, I think that's a great time for them to learn, those skills. And a lot of that is, again, learning work ethic. That there's, just things that need to be done as part of, being in the home and serving others in the home. That there's, different tasks. And my son also helps with cooking. So this is not just my daughter doing everything. My son, again, he's learning. He's having to pay more attention to detail, but they vacuum and clean the tubs and sinks and all of that. So I think there's, some learning that comes, for me. So parents, you have to sit around and serve them all the time. They're capable. They can they can learn that.
They really are.
So,
They really are.
All right, well, let me move on. All right, let's talk real quick about no real teachers or curriculum in homeschool. Again, the homeschool is so wide open. There's so many different curriculums to choose from. And again, some people do the more structured, some people do the more unschool, where the kids are just, kind of following their curiosity. As far as no real teachers, and again, we've kind of addressed this as far as talking about co-ops and even online learning. I would even argue that parents are real teachers. Again, our kids are learning so much from us that sometimes we're not aware of. So that is definitely a viable role as a teacher in their lives. But as far as content specialists, again, you can outsource some of that if you need to. I know some homeschool families where they don't outsource anything, where the parents, are doing everything and they're using a curriculum to kind of go through and hit everything. And I know others who kind of outsource quite frequently. So what would you say to that as far as no real teachers or curriculum? And Misty, I know we're talking a little about working in the public schools and the difference between, what the teachers in the public schools and homeschool parents, if you don't mind to address this myth.
Well, I want to be careful because I love public schools. I think they're necessary. And the teachers that I've had the pleasure of subbing for, a lot of them, they are so wonderful. And they really do care about our kids and they want to teach them. But, I think they're very limited in what they can actually teach. And I'm sure that goes for, it's different state by state. But in Virginia, especially in middle school and high school, teachers are very limited to how far they can go with a particular subject because of SOLs. And their main goal is to make sure these kids can pass these SOLs. And so curriculum, especially here in this county, I feel like it's just SOLs. You could go on IXL right now and have your kid do do IXL for the whole year and they would be done. They could go into a public school and be fine because that's what a lot of teachers use. I just feel like I know they go to college and they're getting their teaching certificates. And I mean, you guys did that, and so you are learning things that, just a regular parent would not. But I feel like curriculums now, you're already teaching your kid. You've already taught your kid up until kindergarten. You were the one teaching your kid everything. If you can read a book, then you can teach your child because curriculums now, I mean, they have curriculums like Saxon Math. Saxon Math tells me what to say and when to say it. And that's what I do because I'm not good at math. And so I'm like, and here's what the Saxon book is telling me to do. And I feel like with teachers, what the point I'm trying to make is teachers in public schools, I feel like they have a list of, this is what I have to teach, and so this is what I'm going to do. They didn't come up with that curriculum on their own. And so you really are qualified to teach your kid, and you've been qualified since the day they were born. So the whole, you're not a real teacher and it's not a real classroom, that's just bogus, And if you think for 1 second that teachers have this like beautiful, like, birds are chirping and the kids are like, that's not happening. So there's a lot of behavioral things going on. And I feel like teachers spend the majority of their time dealing with behavioral issues. And then the teaching is secondary. So, and that's
sometimes how it goes here.
What's that?
I said, sometimes that's how it goes here.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. Some days your whole day is just behavioral issues.
Well, I was going to say our co-op, the ladies who started it, one of the ladies in particular, her idea for the mission of the co-op is to provide support to homeschooling families. So we have a curriculum library where some of us, when we finish with our materials, we donate to the library, and moms can check it out for free for as long as they want to, so that they can try out different types of curriculum to see what works for them and what won't. There are used homeschool curriculum stores in the Charlotte area where you can go and browse homeschool curricula, and you can spend hours in there. And you can actually put your hands on the materials and open them up and look at them. The idea that there are no real curriculum is that's someone who's never typed in homeschool curriculum into Google and just look what comes up. There are so many options. It's honestly a little overwhelming, but as an ESL teacher, you pull from anywhere and everywhere, and you can do it for free because you often didn't have a budget. So, like Rebecca said, she's an eclectic homeschooler. I couldn't agree with that more. We use one curriculum for spelling and language arts. We use 2 different ones for math, and I only have 2 kids, so we've got all of that. And we've cycled through several different curricula over the years, for teaching reading. And what I used that kind of worked for my daughter definitely was not going to work for my son. So we had to step back and do something completely different. But Misty, you said earlier to allow yourself grace, and that's the biggest part of all of this, because we're all, find one homeschool mom who tells you that she has it all together, and you have found a great liar.
Yeah. Or somebody mentally very deluded.
Yes, exactly. No, but our homeschool, one thing I love about our co-op is our moms are all very authentic. I've never met a homeschool mom who wasn't authentic, who just tells you like it is. And, but we can't start our co-op at 9 because none of us can get there by 9. That's just, that's how we roll. We tried very structured, and that's just not who we are as a group. So we have scaled it back. It just, you're learning and growing together. So, and the big push in the public school system right now is to create a 21st century learner with 21st century skills. And the idea of that is that learning goes from the classroom and beyond. So if your classroom is the beyond, then you're already steps ahead of where you need to be. So.
Yeah, that's great. And I will say, I do feel for teachers in this crisis. And I was reading some comments online today, and there was a teacher who said that she was told, I don't know, maybe her administrator, I don't know, her county, but they were told not to teach new concepts during this crisis. And I thought, some kids could handle that. They may want that. Maybe that's why they feel they're going to be behind, is because if they're just doing, tons of review. And like I said, just, hearing something like that, I don't really understand why. Like, why would you not? Again, because everybody's getting different access, you can't necessarily control for how much access everybody's getting. I understand the equity issue there, but I hate that when you hear something like we were told not to teach new concepts. My kids learn a lot of new concepts on their own. again, we've talked about self-direction. My kids are accustomed to that, but yeah, so I think a lot of teachers, I think it's just a lot of like top down is,
Mhm.
kind of what's happening. And so, like I said, with homeschool, you can kind of be a little bit more bottom up where, the kids, you're kind of following them and you're kind of customizing things for them. And I definitely think in the instructional design field, which that's what I'm pursuing right now, um, and the internet and just the face of education is just changing to be more learner centered. And so I feel homeschool really kind of sets the learners up to kind of be things that are going to be more customized for that. So I hope that will happen even in the K-12 realm, as like I said, higher ed and that, homeschool, we're kind of, seeing that shift. So, all right, well, I quickly want to end with just help for families struggling or considering homeschool. Do you have any kind of parting words, but just anything that you would want to say, to people who are struggling now, and what we've certainly covered a lot here, but for people who are considering homeschool, and then there are a lot of parents who are scared, they're panicked, they don't want to send their kids back to school, for, like I said, they're worried about their health, the public health crisis. So what would you say?
I would recommend that they reach out and find someone local that they can talk to. Um, we've had single working parents as part of our co-op. We have moms who stay home and their husbands work. We have had moms who work and the husband works. It just depends. When I started homeschooling, I was working part-time. So it can look any number of ways. And I know that a lot of the parents who are considering it now may be doing it because of this. And I wouldn't want them to walk away from this spring with the understanding that this is homeschool. I would want them to reach out and know that you can make a fresh start anytime. Like you said, there's nothing magical about Labor Day to Memorial Day. And if you need to make a change, we changed my daughter's math curriculum in the middle of the year this year because what we were doing was not working. And I don't have an administrator telling me that I have to make it work. So we shifted gears and tried something new. You can make a fresh start anytime you need to. And you don't have to be alone in making your decisions. Just reach out. There's help all around.
Yeah, I would second that. And, you really aren't alone. If you're considering homeschool, when we first started, one of the main reasons we did that was because my husband was getting deployed to Iraq, and our daughter was just so anxious. And the thought of sending her to kindergarten, I mean, she was just like, please no, And I remember being so scared, like, well, then what? What do we do? And looking back, I'm just like, why are we so concerned about what we look like? It's just it's just a cultural thing. And like I said in the beginning, I think we really need to question, instead of questioning like, oh, is homeschool okay? We need to question, is public school okay? And I think you need to just really, for yourselves and for your family, you just need to think for yourself. And it's okay to have different answers than your neighbor. And trust me when I say, no matter what your situation looks like, there's someone out there with the same situation, or close to it, and you wouldn't walk through that alone. You really wouldn't. And I think that one of the benefits of homeschooling is that our family is so strong. And just this last year, when everybody went to public school and we were all in different directions, we really were just like, we miss like each other, And so if you can really just take a deep breath and not look at your family as a burden, like, they just need to go back to school, and just really just take a deep breath and just look at your life and just think outside of the box. And it's okay. It really is okay. Just give yourself grace and just know that you are smart enough and capable enough, and there are people out there that will walk beside you.
Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah, and I would say that too, to families who are struggling, again, we've still got how many weeks of summer, 9, 10 weeks of summer. So I keep telling people, if the workload is too much, don't feel like you have to, don't feel pressured that you have to do it in a specific way in a specific time frame. And I would also say for teachers, for work that you're sending home, try to make it more user friendly. That the kids, like I said, can do independent work as much as they can. I know some kids, are already behind, but, looking at what you can give for the kids to set them up for success. So thank you guys so much. I hope we've covered a lot. I know there's a lot of myths and things out there about homeschool. So hopefully we're getting the word out that it is a viable option, that we're not all, in our prairie dresses out in the middle of nowhere, that there is a very strong community. And I know Marsha talked about sometimes it can be overwhelming. I know, especially with Charlotte, when I lived there, there was just so much. I tried to make when I was here in Virginia, when I was, we first came here, I made a little chart of all the different co-ops and the different opportunities. And I tried to do that with Charlotte. And I was like, whoa, I can't even, I don't have enough room on my chart paper to make my little chart of all of the choices, because there's just so much. So
I stopped going to
right.
homeschool.
Well, anybody, if you have other questions, please feel free in the comments. This is going to go on YouTube. So if you have other questions and you want to just put those in the answer those, or send me private messages. Like I said, next week we're going to be talking about outdoor education. Again, our kids have been spending a lot of time in front of the screens, so we'll be talking a little bit about how to get them out and the benefits of outdoor education. And like I said, other topics that you might want to hear about, let me know. I do want to talk about personality differences in homeschool. I'm hearing a lot of people struggling there. I'm hearing a lot of people talking about being a 2-income family. And Marsha, you talked about homeschooling when you were working full-time. I've worked full-time. I've worked part-time, gone to school part-time, and we make it work as a family. So that is possible. I also want to talk about vocational training, because I know, Misty, you talked about kids who struggle and kind of get bored and unmotivated because they feel like, what does this really matter? So I do want to talk about vocational training and making things essential, things that are happening in school. And homeschool does open up some of that. And I do want to talk about foreign language education, also the opportunities in homeschool, because you can start at a younger age. You can, put a little more time into it sometimes than what's happening in the traditional schools. So those are a couple of topics I have lined up, and I'm sure we'll come up with more. And thank you so much, Misty and Marsha, for joining me today. I know we went a little bit over, but this is great stuff. So hopefully helpful to the community.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Rebecca.
Of course.
It's nice to see you.
Yeah, I know. Good to see you guys too. All right. Well, thank you so much. So we'll be back next Tuesday at noon. Bye.
Bye.